My CEO fired me after 30 loyal years, but his shocking mistake paved my path to ultimate revenge. The sterile gleam of the corporate boardroom reflected the triumphant smirk on Ryland Thorne's face. His voice, slick with manufactured charisma, resonated through the hushed silence, each syllable a calculated dagger. Silas, my dear fellow, it's a new era. We're streamlining, modernizing. And frankly, your services are no longer aligned with our forward-thinking vision. The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of dismissal, yet delivered with the chilling lightness of a man discarding an old, unneeded tool. Ryland's eyes, cold and dismissive, lingered, savoring what he perceived as a complete victory. A subtle, almost imperceptible tremor ran through the polished mahogany table, perhaps a sympathetic vibration for the man whose world had just been abruptly upended. Silas stood there, a man of 55 years, his frame unyielding, his gaze steady. 30 years. 3 decades meticulously cataloging the very DNA of this sprawling company, preserving its history, safeguarding its most sensitive secrets. His posture, though outwardly calm, held the defiance of an ancient oak weathering a sudden storm. He had dedicated his life to this institution, transforming its chaotic past into an accessible, invaluable resource. Now, he was being dismissed with a casual wave of a manicured hand, deemed an artifact himself. Ryland saw his silence as capitulation, his calm as defeat. The younger man believed he had extinguished a flame, unaware that he had merely fanned an ember into a calculating, strategic fire within Silas. The real story, the one that would unravel Ryland's carefully constructed empire, was not in what he took from Silas, but in what he unwittingly discarded. And Silas, the quiet guardian of the archives, was the only one who truly understood its devastating value. A quiet, almost imperceptible smile touched the corner of Silas's lips, a secret known only to him. The game, he knew, had only just begun. To truly grasp the full weight of that pivotal moment, one had to first understand the extraordinary journey that had led Silas to it. His name was Silas. For 30 years, he was far more than just the head of corporate archives. He was the company's institutional memory, its living repository of every triumph, every failure, every audacious innovation, and every critical foundational truth. His office, nestled deep within the building's older wing, was a sanctuary of organized chaos, a testament to his dedication. Rows upon rows of meticulously labeled binders lined the shelves, their spines a timeline of the company's evolution. Digital terminals hummed quietly, displaying complex data matrices that only Silas truly navigated with ease. Every contract, every patent application, every acquisition agreement, every whispered agreement that shaped the company's destiny, it all passed through his department. He didn't just file documents, he understood their intricate interconnectedness, their historical context, their potential future implications like a master weaver understanding each thread in a complex tapestry. His mind, a labyrinth of cross-reference data, could recall the exact phrasing of a minor amendment from 20 years prior or the specific clause in a founding partnership agreement that no one else remembered, simply by picturing the physical document in its precise location. This wasn't merely a job, it was a calling, a deeply ingrained dedication to the integrity of information, a belief that the past held the keys to the future. The early years of his tenure had been golden, a true partnership. The company, then a burgeoning tech startup, truly valued its history, its arduous journey from a garage operation to a market contender. Silas had worked under the founding CEO, a visionary named Arthur Vance, who possessed a profound understanding that the past was not a burden to be shed but a vital foundation upon which to build. Arthur had championed Silas's meticulous work, recognizing its strategic importance. Silas, Arthur would often say, his eyes twinkling, you are the company's memory and its conscience. Never let us forget where we came from, for that is where our true strength lies. This ethos allowed Silas to flourish. He meticulously developed a system, a unique matrix of physical and digital records, cross-referencing everything with an almost obsessive precision. He learned to discern the whispers in the margins, the secrets buried in appendices, the critical one-off documents that few others ever saw or even knew existed. One such document, a particular, highly sensitive founding charter, held a unique, almost sacred, place in Silas's mental archive. It wasn't just old, it was foundational, an original agreement from the company's inception, granting certain unique, perpetual rights crucial to its core intellectual property. It represented a concession, a necessary sacrifice made in the company's infancy to secure its very existence and early funding. Its existence was known only to a select few original founders, most of whom were long retired or deceased. Its physical location was obscure, deliberately so, tucked away in a rarely accessed subsection of the deepest archive vault, a location Silas had personally designated years ago precisely for its unparalleled security. He knew its exact coordinates, its profound historical significance, and the perilous consequences should it ever be lost or its terms violated. The weight of this secret, this sacred trust, had rested on his shoulders for decades, a silent burden he carried with unwavering diligence. Then came Ryland Thorne. 38 years old, a whirlwind of calculated aggression and ruthless ambition, Ryland arrived not to build upon the company's legacy, but to dismantle what he perceived as its outdated infrastructure. He was a product of a new, faster corporate world, where quarterly reports trumped long-term vision, and innovation was measured solely by immediate profitability. He spoke of synergy, lean operations, and disruptive innovation, words that, in his lexicon, translated to slashing costs, outsourcing functions, and maximizing short-term shareholder value, regardless of the potential long-term impact on the company's integrity or foundational stability. He saw the archives not as a valuable historical record, but as a dusty, inefficient drain on resources, a relic of a bygone era. He openly mocked Silas's department, referring to it with undisguised contempt as the catacombs of corporate decay or the museum of irrelevance. His dismissive attitude was contagious among his inner circle, creating a palpable shift in the corporate atmosphere. Many long-serving employees, like Silas, felt a creeping unease as Ryland's influence grew. Silas and Ryland's first real clash came when Ryland proposed a massive digital transformation initiative. On the surface, it sounded progressive, a necessary step forward. In reality, it was a thinly veiled excuse to purge vast quantities of physical records and outsource digital archiving to a generic, third-party cloud service known for its low cost rather than its robust security or specialized data handling. Silas, ever the pragmatist, raised concerns, detailing the irreplaceable nature of certain physical documents, the inherent security risks of externalizing sensitive data, and the potential legal pitfalls of destroying original, irreplaceable records. He spoke of the founding charter, hinting at its supreme importance without revealing its full, sensitive nature, trying to appeal to Ryland's understanding of risk and legal liability. But Ryland merely scoffed, his eyes gleaming with disdain, impervious to reason that didn't align with his financial metrics. Silas, he'd said, his voice dripping with condescension, your attachment to paper and ink is charmingly anachronistic. We operate in the future, not the past. If it's not digital, it's irrelevant. If it's not immediately profitable, it's dead weight. Your quaint anxieties are costing us millions. He had then turned to his own lieutenants, rolling his eyes, inviting their shared amusement at Silas's old-fashioned ways. Ryland, fueled by a self-righteous conviction in his own genius, pushed through the purge with relentless speed. Boxes upon boxes of documents, decades of meticulously preserved history, were marked for mass disposal. Thousands of irreplaceable records, originals that had no digital counterparts or whose digital scans were incomplete or compromised, were designated for incineration or shredding. The sheer scale of the operation was staggering, designed to be overwhelming, ensuring that no one, not even Silas, could reasonably scrutinize every single item. Ryland even hired a team of external contractors, paid by the volume of destruction, to expedite the process, ensuring no internal staff could intercept or question the purge without risking their own jobs. He had effectively created a bureaucratic blind spot, an unthinking engine of destruction. It was during this wholesale eradication, a process designed to erase the past, that the true vulnerability emerged, precisely as Silas had feared. Rylan, in his ignorant zeal, had included the rarely accessed subsection of the deepest archive vault, the very location of the founding charter, in the general disposal mandate. He didn't know what was there, only that it was old, unused, and therefore, in his limited view, expendable. Silas saw the disposal manifest, a chillingly precise list of items slated for obliteration. His heart sank, then quickened with a cold, chilling resolve that settled deep within his core. The charter. It was on that list. No one else knew. No one else would notice its absence amidst the mountains of discards. Rylan was unknowingly ordering the destruction of the very document that underpinned the company's most valuable asset, the source of its perpetual intellectual property rights. It was a secret Silas had guarded for decades, a knowledge he had carried like a sacred trust. Now, it was becoming his weapon, a silent, devastating power. He didn't try to stop the process publicly. He couldn't. Rylan had made sure of that, isolating Silas, dismissing his warnings as the ramblings of an old guard relic, a man clinging to irrelevance. But Silas moved. Quietly. Strategically. He couldn't save the physical document itself from Rylan's destructive decree, that would expose his knowledge, invalidate his future play, and alert Rylan to his mistake before the trap was sprung. But he could, and did, ensure that its destruction was meticulously documented, its unique identifier recorded, its last known location precisely noted before it was carted away by the oblivious contractors. He also made sure to acquire digital copies of the initial discussions, the official disposal order signed by Rylan, and the manifest detailing the contents of that specific subsection, all before the digital copies were themselves purged from internal servers or transferred to the generic third-party cloud where they would be lost in a sea of unverified data. These digital artifacts, carefully downloaded to an encrypted, external drive that now resided securely in his possession, were his true, secret weapon. They wouldn't prove the document existed in the future, but they would irrefutably prove its intended destruction and Rylan's direct responsibility for it. He knew the physical document would be gone forever. But the evidence of its negligent, catastrophic elimination, and Rylan's direct culpability, would be undeniable. His dismissal, therefore, wasn't an ending, it was a carefully orchestrated prelude. Rylan, blinded by his own towering arrogance, had fired the one man who understood the true value of what he had destroyed. He had fired the one man who held the key to his own undoing. And as Silas walked out of that boardroom, his mind was not consumed by the indignity of his lost job, but by the precise moment he would unleash the truth. The strategic fire had been fanned, and its embers glowed with a quiet, devastating intensity. The weeks following Silas's dismissal were a strange, paradoxical blend of quiet introspection and intense, calculated action. Rylan, convinced that Silas's silence was the hallmark of a broken, defeated man, continued his aggressive restructuring with even greater zeal. He stripped Silas's former department bare, replacing seasoned archivists, some of whom had worked alongside Silas for decades, with inexperienced, outsourced data entry clerks who understood little beyond basic digital file management. Rylan boasted in public forums and internal memos about the millions saved by digitizing and purging the obsolete physical archives, presenting himself as a financial savior. His public statements were filled with thinly veiled jabs at the old ways, subtly reinforcing the narrative that Silas's departure was a necessary step towards a modern, agile future. Rylan saw Silas's absence from the corporate halls as definitive proof of his irrelevance, never once suspecting that Silas's true work had merely moved underground, into the shadows. Silas's plan wasn't about immediate, emotional vindication, it was about surgical precision. It was about waiting for the opportune moment, the point of maximum leverage, when Rylan's hubris would be at its most inflated, and his fall would be most catastrophic. That moment, he knew, would coalesce around the Orion Initiative, a multi-million-dollar acquisition deal that Rylan had been championing with almost messianic fervor. This deal, intended to secure a dominant position in a lucrative emerging market, hinged entirely on the undisputed ownership and perpetual licensing rights of a critical piece of intellectual property, rights directly tied to the very founding charter Rylan had so carelessly ordered destroyed. The irony was a bitter, yet satisfying, twist of fate for Silas. His immediate task was to confirm the deal's progression and identify the precise legal and financial vulnerabilities that would inevitably be exposed by the charter's absence. He wasn't merely relying on his formidable memory, he was systematically cross-referencing publicly available information with the internal documents he had meticulously secured before his departure. He accessed public records of the Orion Group, their corporate history, their legal counsel, and their financial disclosures, looking for any mention of the IP's origins or historical agreements. He even discreetly reached out to a few trusted, long-retired colleagues, ostensibly for catch-up conversations over coffee. These were individuals who had seen the company through its earliest days and still held a quiet affection for its true values. Silas would subtly probe for information about the current state of the company's legal framework, the board's specific concerns, and Rylan's relentless push for the Orion deal. They, unaware of his true intentions, innocently painted a clear picture. The deal was fast-tracking, Rylan was bypassing critical due diligence processes in his haste, and a critical board meeting was scheduled to finalize the terms in a matter of weeks. This was his window, a rapidly closing aperture of opportunity. Silas's intelligence network wasn't complex in the traditional sense, it was simply the result of years of cultivating trust, observing human nature, and understanding the company's internal dynamics. He knew which junior analysts felt undervalued and overlooked by Rylan's aggressive metrics, which mid-level managers were quietly frustrated by Rylan's destructive policies, and which board members harbored lingering doubts about his aggressive, often reckless, tactics. He made no direct contact with anyone still employed at the company regarding the charter itself. That would be too risky, too direct. His actions were entirely external, leveraging his deep institutional knowledge to deduce, infer, and predict the precise sequence of events. He was a master chess player, making his moves in silent contemplation, far from the board. He spent countless hours in his home office, a quiet space now dominated by his single-minded pursuit, not lamenting his past, but meticulously constructing his future. The encrypted drive became his central command, a digital fortress containing the tools of his impending revolution. On it, he organized not just the irrefutable evidence of the charter's destruction, but a comprehensive timeline of Rylan's other cost-cutting measures, highlighting instances where corners were cut on critical legal or compliance matters, creating a pattern of negligent behavior. He compiled a compelling narrative, supported by irrefutable digital receipts, email exchanges between Rylan and his team, and official company manifests, all evidence that Rylan himself had signed off on. He even identified the exact external disposal company Rylan had used, and through a public records search, discovered their standard operating procedure for verifying contents before destruction, a procedure that confirmed the charter should have been identified as a unique, historical document, had Rylan not explicitly mandated a no questions asked bulk disposal, effectively bribing them to bypass their own protocols. Every detail was a piece of the elaborate puzzle. Rylan, meanwhile, was soaring to what he believed was the zenith of his career. Press releases lauded his visionary leadership, describing him as a titan of industry. Stock prices, buoyed by the promise of the Orion deal, were on an unprecedented upward trajectory, delighting shareholders. He held lavish press conferences, his pronouncements growing bolder, more arrogant with each perceived success. He spoke of his ruthless efficiency, painting himself as the architect of a new corporate dawn, while subtly disparaging the dead weight he had shed, a clear reference to Silas and the old guard. He was so consumed by his own self-aggrandizement, so confident in his untouchable position, that he saw no shadows, no approaching storm. He assumed Silas was simply another casualty, licking his wounds in quiet obscurity, swallowed by the mundane reality of forced retirement. He couldn't have been more wrong. Silas's calm facade was not born of resignation, but of absolute, unwavering certainty. The Zygarnik effect was working, not on him, but on Rylan. Rylan had dismissed the founding charter as irrelevant, a task completed and forgotten, a closed chapter. But the very incompleteness of his understanding, the fact that he never truly grasped its significance, was the fatal flaw. He believed the chapter was closed. Silas knew it had merely been left open, waiting for the precise moment to snap shut, sealing Ryland's fate. And that moment, he calculated, was just days away. The board meeting to approve the Orion Initiative was set. The stage was being prepared, not just for Ryland's illusory triumph, but for Silas's ultimate, quiet, devastating revelation. The pervasive silence that surrounded Silas was not emptiness, it was the gathering of thunder, a storm brewing on the horizon, unseen by those too focused on their own reflection. The air in the executive boardroom was thick with anticipation, a palpable hum of impending success. The large, polished mahogany table gleamed under the soft glow of the recessed lighting, reflecting the faces of the board of directors, a collection of seasoned investors, sharp legal minds, and industry veterans, all powerful figures in their own right. At the head of the table sat Ryland Thorne, radiating a superficial confidence, his presentation on the Orion Initiative nearing its triumphant conclusion. He was detailing the final financial projections, the unprecedented market expansion, the projected revenue streams that promised unprecedented wealth. His voice was smooth, persuasive, painting a vivid picture of unparalleled success, a testament to his visionary leadership. And with the acquisition of Orion's IP portfolio, Ryland concluded, a triumphant smile spreading across his face, a preening self-satisfaction in his eyes, we solidify our market dominance for decades to come. This deal, board members, is not just a transaction, it is a legacy. It is the future of our company, secured. He gestured dramatically towards a massive screen displaying the projected growth charts, a veritable cascade of green arrows pointing steeply upwards, a visual representation of his grand promises. A murmur of approval rippled through the room, punctuated by a few appreciative nods. The vote, it seemed, was a mere formality, a rubber stamp on Ryland's destined ascent. If I may, a voice cut through the burgeoning applause. It was calm, measured, yet it carried an undeniable authority that instantly quieted the room, drawing all attention. All eyes turned towards the elegant, heavy oak entrance doors. There stood Silas. Dressed in a simple, impeccably tailored dark suit, his silver hair neatly combed, his expression serene, almost placid. He was not an invited guest, his presence was an unexpected anomaly, a glitch in Ryland's carefully curated narrative. A security guard, looking flustered and apologetic, appeared behind him, having clearly failed to stop Silas's quiet, determined entry. Ryland's triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a scowl of confused irritation, then a dawning comprehension that quickly morphed into barely suppressed fury. Silas? Ryland spluttered, his voice edged with thinly veiled contempt, a vein pulsing visibly in his temple. What in God's name are you doing here? This is a private board meeting. Security, remove this man immediately. With all due respect, Mr. Thorne, Silas interjected, his voice unwavering, resonating with a quiet power that commanded attention, my presence here, however uninvited, is directly pertinent to the Orion Initiative you are about to finalize. In fact, it's absolutely crucial. Silas walked calmly, deliberately, to an empty chair at the far end of the long table, pulling it out with a quiet scrape and sitting down as if he had every right to be there, as if he had been invited all along. The board members exchanged uneasy, curious glances. Silas's audacity, his profound composure in the face of Ryland's fury, disarmed them, piquing their interest. This is outrageous. Ryland roared, half rising from his chair, his face reddening with rage. You're trespassing. You're fired, Silas, remember? You have no right to be here. Indeed, Mr. Thorne, Silas replied, meeting Ryland's furious gaze with a calm, almost pitying look. And it is precisely that act of severance, combined with your subsequent directives, that has led me here. Before you cast your votes on this legacy deal, I believe the board has a right to be aware of a critical, indeed fatal, oversight. Silas calmly placed a slim, encrypted tablet on the gleaming table before him, its smooth surface a stark contrast to the agitated expressions around him. Board members, for 30 years, Silas was entrusted with the corporate archives. He didn't just store documents, he understood their intrinsic value, their legal weight, their potential to safeguard or imperil this company. He specifically warned Mr. Thorne about the perils of a wholesale, indiscriminate purge of original physical records. His warnings, however, were dismissed as anachronistic and inefficient, the ramblings of an old, irrelevant man. Ryland slammed his hand on the table, a desperate attempt to regain control. This is a pathetic attempt at sabotage. He's just bitter he was let go. Don't listen to him. Is it sabotage, Mr. Thorne? Silas asked, his voice rising slightly, cutting through Ryland's bluster, to reveal a truth that could save this company from catastrophic legal and financial ruin? He looked directly at the board chairman, a stern, gray-haired woman named Eleanor Vance, whose sharp eyes had been observing every subtle nuance of the exchange. Madam Chair, members of the board, the Orion Initiative relies fundamentally on the perpetual licensing rights tied to the original intellectual property of this company. These rights are not merely stated in general terms, they are meticulously detailed and legally codified in a unique document, the original, founding charter, dated November 12, 1993. A ripple of murmurs went through the room, more pronounced this time. Some of the older board members visibly stiffened, a flicker of recognition, even alarm, in their eyes. The younger ones looked perplexed, trying to grasp the significance. This founding charter, Silas continued, his voice gaining a quiet, undeniable power, is the bedrock upon which our claim to that core IP rests. Without it, the perpetual nature of those rights becomes disputable, subject to challenge, and potentially null and void. And without those perpetual rights, board members, the Orion Initiative is not a legacy, it is a multi-million-dollar liability, a house built on sand, a colossal legal and financial exposure waiting to collapse. Ryland was visibly sweating now, his face a mask of dawning, sickening horror. His confident posture had crumpled. That document is irrelevant. It's ancient history. It's been digitized. It's gone. His words were a desperate, pathetic plea. Precisely, Mr. Thorne, Silas affirmed, his gaze unwavering, cutting through Ryland's frantic denial. It is gone. Not merely digitized, an incomplete, legally insufficient scan, Silas might add, but physically destroyed. Under your direct orders. Silas tapped the tablet, and with a soft click, a scanned image projected onto the massive main screen. It wasn't the charter itself, but a disposal manifest, stark and undeniable, complete with Ryland's crisp digital signature and the specific archive location code, detailing the contents scheduled for obliteration. The founding charter, with its unique identification number, was clearly listed among the items. This manifest, board members, confirms that the original, founding charter, was indeed included in the mass disposal order, Silas stated, his voice devoid of triumph, merely stating a devastating fact. Silas possesses the complete digital trail, the signed directive, the disposal company's confirmation of receipt for that specific manifest, and internal emails confirming the expedited, unsupervised nature of the purge. Mr. Thorne, in his zeal to modernize and streamline, ordered the destruction of the very document that legally underpins this company's most valuable asset. The founding charter is gone. Irrecoverable. And without it, the perpetual rights you claim with the Orion Group are, legally speaking, a mirage, a fantasy that will dissolve in the first serious legal challenge. Silence descended, heavy and absolute, suffocating in its intensity. The board members stared, aghast, from the damning screen to Ryland, whose face had gone ashen, his complexion a sickly gray. His breath hitched, a desperate, rasping sound. He opened his mouth, but no words came out, only a strangled, inarticulate gasp. His world, meticulously built on arrogance and utter disregard for the very foundations he claimed to lead, was crumbling before his eyes, reduced to dust by the quiet truth. The triumph he had savored mere minutes ago had dissolved into utter, humiliating defeat, a public evisceration. Silas's revenge was not a scream, not a shout, but a meticulously delivered whisper of truth, resonating with the force of an earthquake that shattered an entire empire. The aftermath of Silas's revelation was immediate and brutally effective. The boardroom, moments earlier buzzing with anticipation, erupted into a cacophony of urgent whispers and furious demands, as though a dam had burst. Eleanor Vance, the board chair, her face etched with a mix of profound shock and icy, righteous anger, was the first to speak, her voice low but piercing enough to cut through the rising clamor. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her gaze fixed on him, unwavering and unforgiving, "is this true? Did you, against the explicit warnings of Mr. Silas, authorize the destruction of this founding charter?" Her question hung in the air, weighted with the gravitas of a final judgment. Rylan, still reeling, his mind a chaotic mess of self-preservation and desperate denial, could only stammer, "It was an oversight. An old document. We had digital copies. It was redundant." His words were hollow, pathetic excuses against the irrefutable, digital evidence Silas had presented. Each word he uttered only further exposed the depth of his negligence. "Redundant," one of the legal counsel board members scoffed, a senior attorney whose reputation was built on meticulous due diligence. "Mr. Thorne, you know as well as anyone that for foundational intellectual property, an original physical document, especially one detailing perpetual rights, is often irreplaceable in a court of law. A scanned copy, without the original's provenance, without the physical paper and ink, holds significantly less legal weight. This isn't redundant, it's a catastrophic legal vulnerability. It's gross negligence." The board immediately moved to suspend the Orion initiative. The multi-million-dollar deal, which Rylan had touted as his crowning achievement, evaporated in an instant, replaced by a looming shadow of potential lawsuits from the Orion Group for breach of contract and misrepresentation, and internal shareholder suits for gross negligence and malfeasance. The company faced not just a lost deal, but a potential financial catastrophe and a public relations nightmare. Rylan Thorne was not just fired, he was publicly disgraced, his name dragged through the mud of corporate failure. The news, carefully leaked by the now furious board, spread like wildfire through the industry. The narrative shifted dramatically from his visionary leadership to his reckless incompetence and disregard for corporate integrity. Investigations were launched, both internal and by regulatory bodies, scrutinizing every aspect of his tenure. His aggressive tactics, once lauded by superficial media, were now scrutinized for their ethical and legal boundaries, revealing a pattern of cut corners and disregard for due process. Within weeks, his once promising career was in tatters, his reputation irrevocably ruined. He faced not only the immediate loss of his position and significant financial penalties but also the widespread scorn of an industry that once admired his audacity. The very ruthlessness he had employed against Silas, the very arrogance that blinded him, became the instrument of his own spectacular undoing. The shockwaves reverberated through the company, a profound tremor that cleared the air. Many who had quietly endured Rylan's tyrannical reign, the silent majority who had seen their work undervalued and their wisdom dismissed, felt a profound, albeit grim, satisfaction. There was a palpable shift in the corporate culture. The relentless focus on short-term gains, the ruthless cost-cutting that sacrificed long-term stability, began to recede, replaced by a renewed emphasis on long-term stability, ethical practices, and, ironically, the preservation of institutional knowledge. Former colleagues, those who had watched Silas walk away from the company with pity in their eyes, now approached him with a newfound respect, even awe. Some expressed their sincere regret for not having spoken up, for not having defended him against Rylan's tyranny. Others simply acknowledged his foresight, his unwavering commitment to the truth, a quiet strength that had endured. Silas accepted their apologies and acknowledgments with quiet dignity. His purpose had not been to gloat, but to ensure justice and protect the integrity of the institution he had served for so long, and that purpose had been achieved. As Silas walked out of the corporate building that day, not as an employee but as an agent of profound, necessary change, the difference was profound. The oppressive weight of injustice had lifted, replaced by the quiet satisfaction of a strategically won victory. Months passed. The company, battered but not broken, began its slow, arduous journey of recovery and self-reassessment. A new CEO, a seasoned veteran named Alexander Sterling, known for his ethical leadership and profound respect for institutional memory, was appointed. One of his first actions was to initiate a comprehensive review of all archived materials, working closely with the remaining, smaller archive team. He reached out to Silas, not with a formal offer of re-employment, knowing Silas had moved beyond that, but with a request for his expertise as a high-level consultant. Silas accepted, not out of a desire to return to the daily corporate grind, but to ensure that the bitter lessons learned from Ryland's destructive tenure would be permanently ingrained in the company's DNA. His role was advisory, guiding them in rebuilding their information infrastructure, ensuring that such a catastrophic oversight could never happen again. His wisdom, once dismissed, was now actively sought and deeply valued. Silas's life, however, had found a new, enriching rhythm. The initial financial impact of losing his job was quickly mitigated by the consulting fees and the quiet satisfaction of his strategic victory. He spent more time cultivating his passions, delving into ancient history texts, exploring remote landscapes, and advising other organizations on the critical importance of historical preservation in the digital age. He became a respected voice, not just in corporate archives, but in the broader discussion of organizational wisdom and ethical leadership, his quiet triumph a testament to his principles. Ryland Thorne, on the other hand, vanished completely from the public eye. His name became synonymous with corporate hubris and catastrophic failure. He was effectively blacklisted from the upper echelons of the industry, a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms whenever ambition overshadowed integrity. His empire, built on sand and sustained by arrogance, had crumbled, leaving him with nothing but the bitter taste of his own downfall, a stark lesson in the fragility of unearned power. The story of Silas and Ryland is not just a tale of revenge, but a profound lesson in the true nature of value. Ryland represented the fleeting illusion of success, quick gains, superficial change, a disdain for anything that couldn't be quantified on a quarterly report. He valued only what was immediate, visible, and superficially profitable. He saw knowledge as a disposable commodity, experience as an outdated relic, and integrity as an inconvenience. Silas, however, represented the enduring power of true value, the meticulous, often unseen, work of building foundations, preserving wisdom, understanding the intricate tapestry of history, and recognizing the quiet strength in truth. His revenge wasn't loud or violent, it was quiet, strategic, and rooted in the very knowledge Ryland had dismissed as irrelevant. It was the triumph of quiet diligence over arrogant short-sightedness, of profound understanding over superficial expediency. Life, in its profound wisdom, often teaches that true strength lies not in the loudest roar, but in the calmest, most strategic whisper. It is found in the patience to observe, the wisdom to understand, and the courage to act when the moment is precisely right. Never underestimate the power of hidden knowledge, nor the quiet, enduring strength of those who carry it. For in the end, it is not the loudest voice that prevails, but the one that speaks the truth, with irrefutable evidence, at the most critical juncture. This story, like so many others we share on this channel, is a testament to the power of justice, resilience, and the invaluable lessons life throws our way. If you found Silas's journey compelling, and believe in the quiet triumph of wisdom over arrogance, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you won't miss our next story of ultimate vindication and unforgettable life lessons. We delve deep into tales where justice prevails, and where the most unlikely heroes find their path to ultimate revenge. Now, we want to hear from you. Have you ever faced such blatant ingratitude or arrogance in your own life or career? What was your reaction? And if you were Silas, what would you have done differently, or exactly the same? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your insights fuel our community, and we read every single one. Thank you for watching, and remember, the quietest minds often hold the most powerful truths.